Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, not Jason Miles. This is M. Toussaint filling in for Jason Miles. He is currently away on family business, probably expanding his family even more, knowing him. Welcome to another episode of This is Revolution podcast. So glad to have you guys with us live, and of course, happy to have the people that will be checking this later or on audio only formats. Before we start, if you're new to the channel, please hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you're notified when we go live. We're constantly adding new shows and doing cross streams with other channels. As always, thank you to all the subscribers on YouTube and Twitch and all the audio only podcast formats you find us. Also, thanks to all our patrons. Collectively, you are the fuel in the engine that keeps TIR moving along. So if you're enjoying what we do here and you want access to the post-show champagne room, there's only one way: become a patron. For as little as $3 a month or $30 a year, you can have access to the champagne rooms past and present. That's totally worth it, you guys. I think you should do it. Be part of the live show audience of the Mau Mau Hour and join us as always for the Ruckus movie night. Tonight, we're talking about Chicago. If you couldn't have guessed from my lovely thumbnail, that will be changed because it is subpar for this show. I had to do it myself on the fly, and it's not gonna fly. It's how that's gonna go down. There are plenty of changes taking place in Chicago, and tonight we've got one of its proudest sons here to represent. Please welcome the current scholar of social work, Kenzo Shibata of the Kenzo Shibata Show. I don't have
Glorious intro.
I don't have the soundboard to do the applause, but just imagine applause here. Yeah, there you go. All right. What's the status of your show now, and how have you been since the last time you were on?
I'm doing great. I was on about a month ago. I want to say you were out, MT, and that was we did an episode on the Satanic Panic. It was me, Jason, and Varn. That was a lot of fun. We got to talk about the devil. We got to talk about Motley Crue, and moral panics around the youth being corrupted. And that's the three of us. That's in our ballywick.
Nice. I got to go back and check out that episode.
And yeah, as far as my show goes, it's on kind of an indefinite hiatus. The podcast that I'd been doing, Red Flag, we decided to put on indefinite hold right now. And yeah, maybe new things ahead. I do get the itching to do more media, but I also do enjoy being Jason's Jay Leno.
Yeah. Well, you're also a scholar of social work. You've got plenty on your plate.
That is correct. Yes. I am currently working on my master's in social work. This year I'm full time in school for the first time in like 20 years. It's weird.
Wow.
College is a lot different than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I had to give a talk to some students. And I remember a time when students would at least put their cell phones under their desks and like try to pretend like they're paying attention. But nah, like they're like this. Some of
Yeah.
them, and, they're paying for it. It's not like, in the public schools,
Yeah.
where, you can call their parents on them. Now it's like, okay, well, I guess you're not going to learn, even though you're spending thousands of dollars or putting yourself into debt.
Maybe they're doing TikToks of the professor.
Oh, I hope not. Because I was giving a talk today, and I don't want to be. There's a reason why I'm not on TikTok. It scares me.
You and me both, man. You and me both. All right. Well, we're gonna do something unusual for This Is Revolution. We're gonna start with some good news. We're
Yes.
gonna we're gonna start with the bread in our bad news sandwich, if you will. So the good bread is from a piece by friend of the show, Bronco Marchitich. That is how you pronounce his name, Marchitich.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Chicago is about to end the subminimum wage for tipped workers. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson's one fair wage ordinance cleared the city council's Workforce Committee in a 9-3 vote this past Wednesday, the culmination of years of organizing by low wage workers, activists, and months of wheeling and dealing by the mayor and his socialist allies in the city council. If approved by the city council on October 4th, as it's been expected to be, the ordinance will scrap the city's two-tier wage system that leaves tipped workers laboring for a minimum wage $5 lower than non-tipped than their non-tipped counterparts, with a uniform $15 minimum wage phased in for all workers by 2028. Kenzo, can you tell us a bit of the behind the scenes of this huge step forward?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this. This is something that definitely could not have happened if the left in the city hadn't been building for the past, I mean, for decades, but really in a very concerted effort for the past 10 years or so. We elected one socialist alderman in 2015, Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who's now the floor leader of Mayor Johnson. And, he was very much involved in all this. So, between the actual DSA socialists that make up a caucus within the city council, and their progressive allies, people who are a little, not quite as far left, but will be on board when they know that they're helping their constituents. There's a good progressive voting bloc in our city for the first time, I think ever, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw a city council under mayors Emanuel and Lightfoot becoming more and more independent. And now that we have Mayor Brandon Johnson, who has, a background in education and labor, we have an ally in City Hall as well. So he's both, leading and following this sea change that's happening. As far as this particular initiative to raise the tip minimum wage, this was a proposal that came from the newly elected progressive alderman Jesse Fuentes,
Mm-hmm.
who, by the way, is also an alum of Northeastern Illinois University, where I am personally a student at the moment. She worked with Mayor Johnson and Carlos Ramirez Rosa, who I mentioned earlier, and they negotiated with the Restaurant Association, which, it's funny, for years and years we keep hearing we can't get anything done because of the real estate lobby or the Restaurant Association. And, no one tried. Rahm Emanuel gave these folks whatever they wanted. Mayor Daley
Oh,
gave these folks whatever they wanted. Lori Lightfoot said she was going to be different, but then gave these folks whatever they wanted. And now we have the city executive saying, well, we can work with them maybe. And it actually came out, this was, I don't want to say bipartisan because, our city elections are nonpartisan. Everyone's pretty much a Democrat with a handful of independent socialists. And so now we have this bill that's made it out of committee, and next week it's going to be voted on.
that's exciting.
Yes.
That's exciting. Next week is a big week.
And right now, the restaurant industry here is the largest employer of 16 to 24-year-olds. And, we've seen this rash of youth. It's a moral panic right now. There have been a
Mm-hmm.
few incidents of large swaths of young people going to downtown and essentially wreaking havoc. And,
Really?
there's this big panic about this, like, oh, these kids, we need to be tougher on crime. We need to do this, that, and the other thing. Well, what we saw is this complete depletion over the past maybe 30 years of any kind of youth programs. There used to be midnight basketball programs. So, kids who were up all night, had something to do where they'd be supervised and get some exercise. There isn't really much, as we're seeing in like the neoliberalization of everything, you
Mm-hmm.
can't really do anything for free anymore. Just leaving the house costs money, and kids have very little to do. So, it causes these kind of problems. And, this could even be an incentive right now. It might actually be worth working and, saving some money and, um, not having to find alternative ways of passing the time. And like, we're going to talk about in a little bit the homeless problem and the
Mm-hmm.
poverty problems in the city. Being such a big service industry town, this is going to be huge for a lot of people.
You make a good point. You make a very good point. Big service industry town. My mind is always on the gangs in Chicago,
Mm.
and I think that this would be a big help to lowering the
Speaking of
gangs.
which, we recently got rid of the gang database in the city, which was a horrible means of criminalizing large swaths of people, including many, many young people. This was a way of labeling, just working class people. And, a lot of people in those databases were never parts of gangs. One thing
Mhm,
also to realize about Chicago is, this is a town that had a long history of gangs, of,
mhm,
organized street crime. What had happened in like the 90s, a number of the top leaders of the street gangs in Chicago were all sent to prison. There was a big effort to put them away, and the theory was you put the leaders away, and all of their minions will become fine, upstanding young people. And
mhm,
what ended up happening was we just don't have organized gangs like we used to. We have crews, which is
mhm,
even worse because instead of it being, swaths of territory against swaths of territory, it's block versus block. And sometimes the kids that are involved, they don't even know who their enemies are. So there's a lot of misidentified people and a lot of kind of random violence because of that. And the end of this gang database is going to, I think, at least alleviate some of those problems.
mhm. That sounds fantastic. Whose initiative is that? The ending the gang database.
I know Alderwoman Rosana Rodriguez was highly involved in that, but I think it was a concerted effort with all of the socialist and progressive alder people in the city.
Hmm. How long have they been in office?
Rosanna got in office in 2019. In 2015, that was when Carlos Ramirez Rosa was first elected, and that was huge because he not only did he win, um, he beat an incumbent who was very tied to the old city machine, and he did this by being just kind of a proud son of the Logan Square neighborhood
Hmm.
and having a lot of relationships with people. And, even though there was a lot of red baiting done in the media and through opposition campaigns against him, if your neighbors know you, when some stranger comes to town and says this person is a dirty, filthy communist who's going to ruin everything,
Hmm.
they're not going to believe them because they're like, no, this is the nice young man who came and asked me if my, streets have been shoveled enough. And so he was able to win in 2015, get reelected in 2019, along with um, others like Rosana Rodriguez, Daniel Espada. Um, and what they were able to do was at first, they didn't get a lot of respect, I'd say, in city council. But when they showed that they had organized constituencies, and that they were able to organize movements behind the initiatives that they were pushing in city council. Some of the more not the quite as leftist, more progressive types started to follow their lead. And then other
Hmm.
folks who were like, well, I don't want to be going the way of a lot of these old machine leaders who
Hmm.
are losing their seats left and right. They started to come on board. So, you need 26 votes in the city council to get something done. And, under Lori Lightfoot, that was also a problem because you wanted to have a supermajority, because she would oppose anything progressive going through the city, or at least, go after anyone who opposes her agenda. And now we have Brandon Johnson, who is from a lot of the same movements that these alder people are also from. So now we have an ally.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, having lived in the city my whole life, it always just seemed like a daily was going to be in charge
Hmm.
and nothing good is ever going to happen.
Jesus.
Like, it's a great city for a lot of reasons, but it's always like, yeah, but the government sucks, but we have to just kind of deal with it. Now
Hmm.
there's hope. So it's a very different vibe here.
I sense that, and not just from Jacobin.
Hmm.
There's a new sheriff in town. Well, he's
Hmm.
actually installing a new top cop as well.
Yeah, yeah, we'll
And
see how that goes.
we'll
I'm
see how the top cop is on board with our later story, so that's promising.
yes,
Promising.
as opposed to like every other top cop we've had. I mean, one of the problems though is that the head of the police union here, John Cataranza, he is far right wing, believes conspiracy theories. Like he is, you know, not he is what you don't suspect of as someone from Chicago, but he looks and sounds like the type of person who always talks shit about Chicago.
Nice. Wow. So where did mayors Emanuel and Lightfoot stand on this minimum wage issue? How is Brandon Johnson so different?
Well, Lori Lightfoot, even though she didn't campaign specifically on raising the tip minimum wage, she ran on a very progressive platform in 2019 when she ran. Um, in fact, like her education plan mirrored the Chicago teachers unions.
Mhm.
And as soon as she took office, she reversed herself on any progressive legislation she that came to her desk. She blocked a similar proposal in 20 sorry, she blocked a proposal in 2019 that would have um, phased out the tip minimum wage by 2023. And like I was saying before, she reversed herself on a lot of different positions.
Mhm.
And in that first year, it was really a banner year for her. She forced us on an 11-day teacher strike because she didn't want to agree to the reforms that she herself ran on. Things like increasing the number of school care workers, like social workers and nurses. She didn't want to increase school resources, and she didn't want to increase funding for schools that serve large numbers of homeless students. Like one thing that, until our last contract that was absolutely ridiculous was, we have some schools where there's large numbers of students who are in really kind of transient living situations. And then some schools where the kids are fairly middle to upper middle class, even all got the same amount of funding per kid. What we fought for and won in 2019, which she initially opposed, was getting additional resources to those schools that have high homeless populations to get those students what they needed. We all know in education that if a kid is hungry, if they, you know, are sick, they're not going to learn.
Mhm.
They're going to be focused
Right.
on their tummy rumbling and their fever. And when we have schools where and you get a nurse once or twice a week because you're sharing a nurse with two other schools, you'll have a
Wow.
kid with a fever. And if they don't have folks to call to pick them up,
Mhm.
they might be sitting in an office for a while and they're not learning. um,
No.
so Lori Lightfoot did nothing at all. Like she definitely did not care about these people and did nothing for them. Um, she was a big ally to the Restaurant Association. In fact, during the height of the pandemic, she pushed for the reopening of bars and restaurants, even before public spaces like parks and beaches were open. So, she wanted the Restaurant Association to be happy with her so they could fill their restaurants with a bunch of people coughing and drinking beers.
Ew.
But anything that the city was responsible for where people could safely hang out outside, she wasn't interested in. So I don't think this is something that could have happened under her. And I would consider Rahm Emanuel the human incarnation of a bank. So this was just like a no-go for him.
Yikes. Okay.
Like
he
no one had to
certainly
lobby Rahm to do the wrong thing. He just would do the wrong thing on his own. And then go to the lobbyist and say, now where's my money?
he
Allegedly.
certainly dressed like a large bank. I'll give him that. That's all I'll give him. Wow, Lori Lightfoot, really not a good record here.
No. She also, the interesting thing about her is every progressive voice in the city had given her the opportunity to become this transformative mayor. If
Mhm.
she picked up on all of these things that Johnson is now picking up on, she could have been reelected, I think. She didn't even have to do much work because you have so many community leaders, leaders of NGOs, and older people willing to do the policy work
Mhm.
and do the research and do the organizing. But Lori was just an obstructionist, and yeah, now I believe she's giving lectures at Harvard on is one of the Ivies. She's giving lectures about how to run a city under a pandemic, which she failed at.
What? I'm amazed how these people fail up. It is
Mhm.
incredible. My resume would look so different if I could fail up. I'd be in a completely different place. Oh my gosh.
You have
Okay.
to fail up, but also make evil people happy with you.
Right.
That's the
It's
key.
true. That's very true. What's the relationship between the Chicago's teachers union and the Johnson administration?
Well, Mayor Johnson, or I've always known him as Brandon, was a member of CTU. He taught middle school and also high school. And then later, he and I actually both took jobs with the CTU in 2010. He was an organizer, and I was a communications director. And I worked with him for a number of years in the early 2010s. I went on to work for our state federation, and he became a CTU lobbyist, and then
Mhm.
eventually was elected to be a Cook County commissioner as well. And from there, he was able to build, his political machine, um, which got other progressive people elected as well. So he's been a very close ally of the union while in office, and he ran with the full support of the CTU for mayor, along with the labor coalition that CTU is a part of, which included service workers and SEIU, and other unions. And also, which was really unprecedented, was the American Federation of Teachers, our national union, supported him and put a lot of resources behind his campaign. And usually, our national does not support municipal races. So they saw something in this. They saw an opportunity, and it worked.
Wow. I'm impressed. I'm impressed by this guy, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
He's doing a good job. Well, I mean, he hasn't even hit his 100 days, his first 100 days, has he?
Hmm. That was, it's funny you should mention though. Let's go, Brandon, because it's a small population, but we do have a MAGA population within the city.
Mhm.
They hated the fact his name was Brandon because we appropriated. We did a cultural appropriation on MAGA, and we stole "Let's Go Brandon" from them, and we used it, and they hated it so much.
Oh my gosh, that's
It's like
hilarious.
the worst
You're not using that right. Give me that.
thing. And then they have to explain. Well, you see, it's a meme because at this racetrack they said the wrong thing, and the reporter. No, no, we're literally just saying we want our guy Brandon to win.
That's it.
Memes have to be simple, guys.
That's right. That's right. The left needs to learn that. Under the ordinance, which will go into effect next July, tipped workers' pay would rise 8% each year until reaching parity in 2028, which is kind of right around the corner.
Hmm.
Part of a compromise struck with the restaurant industry. Are there other examples of Johnson reaching out to potential adversaries to find common ground?
Well, he's only been in office since May, so this is a huge win. I mean, it's not quite a win
Mhm.
yet, but just getting things as far as it did has been huge. And I think this kind of sets the stage for similar work, and he's definitely going to need that. One thing that he did was he let go of a number of people from the Chicago Board of Education. Of course, currently, as it stands, the Chicago Board of Education is an appointed board. We are phasing in an elected board over time, but he did keep the president of the Board of Education and a number of top officials there to work with the new administration. Even though I know, from what I understand, there was a mass exodus of central office employees for the Board of Education when he took over because things have been run one way for so long,
Yeah.
it's got to be hard to teach an old dog new tricks. When the idea was let's starve the shit out of these schools until they fail and then close them down. And then, well, let's just open a charter school that we don't really have to manage ourselves.
Right.
Now that we're not going to follow that model, these people who've done things one way their entire careers, they're kind of useless, some of them. But from what
Mhm.
I understand, he has found people that have common ground with wanting to actually improve the school system. And his administration is working with them. So I'm hoping this next contract is going to have a lot more reforms that are going to
Mhm.
make the schools run better and make things better for teachers and students.
You love to see it.
Yes, and it's rare that you do.
It's rare that you do. I just wanted to add one fair wage is the group that was working with the city council. They are now currently targeting 25 states, including New York, Arizona, and Colorado. I personally am expecting the most fierce pushback in New York, since it is also a restaurant town.
Hmm.
But that would benefit so many struggling New Yorkers.
Yeah, Eric Adams is such a Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, I could see that.
I hope that means that there's a Brandon Johnson on the way.
Yeah,
um, but like just even on just a personality level, like Lori Lightfoot and Eric Adams are just such both deeply embarrassing people.
they are.
Did you see that picture of Eric Adams in Israel? I think he was at the Wailing Wall, and someone did a zoom in on this friendship bracelet he was wearing, and it spelled out the letters "hustle" on it,
Oh Lord,
which is very much like Lori Lightfoot's fedoras and trench coats. Like, who does that?
who does that?
Like, that's not even a good "how do you do, fellow kids" thing because kids aren't really doing that.
No, kids are not doing that at all. He's watching the wrong TikTok.
Yes.
Eric Adams, his middle name should be "Who does that?" He's the worst.
He is.
Just don't even know what to do with that guy.
Just vote him out.
I wish. I wish I could do it tomorrow.
Hmm.
That would be great. So, ending the subminimum wage laws is right in time to help prevent the working poor from sliding into homelessness. Here's our next story. Chicago has the highest poverty rates among the nation's biggest cities, including San Francisco, and Los Angeles, according to IllinoisPolicy.org, with more than 450,000 men, women, and children living in poverty in Chicago. The city's impoverished population is the fourth largest in the nation, behind New York City, Los Angeles, and Houston. The city's poverty rate is 17.2%, and that is far higher than the US poverty rate of 11.5%. And I do have a graph to show.
We love visuals.
We love a good visual here. Here we are. So you see Chicago in the red, right in the middle.
We are a red city now, I hope.
And you've got the US average at 15.9% here.
Mm.
Chicago's at 17.2. Um yeah, you've got Philadelphia at the top. That's a little surprising to me
Hmm.
because you hear a lot about California, and not
Yeah.
just on this show. You hear a lot about the warmer places. So that was a little surprising to me.
Yeah. Currently in Chicago, there's 70,000 homeless people. And this is a huge number. And I have to say, this is, a direct result of the policies under Mayors Daley and Emanuel and Lightfoot. They've lowered the standard of living and forced more and more people to live in poverty. And I don't really know like numbers or anything about folks moving south or west, but one thing I have seen in the past 20 or so years is more the poor folks in Chicago, when public housing was being raised like at a very
Mhm.
rapid rate. A lot of folks took their Section 8 vouchers down to central and southern Illinois or the suburbs, which are actually in a lot of places much cheaper to live. And, that those vouchers, EBT goes a lot further. Chicago's just a very expensive city.
Mhm.
It's not in New York or in LA, but it is, much more expensive than it had been. You know, I'd say, it's accelerated very rapidly, the cost of everything. And so you're seeing these small towns like basically not know what to do with their median income being somewhere right in the middle and all of a sudden dramatically dropping. Schools not really knowing what to do with higher numbers of students in special education, because when you're living in poverty, um, those test scores tend to drop. And
Mhm.
rapid gentrification everywhere also has really pushed that. Particularly the north side had many more pockets of working class and poor folks. Nowadays, more and more of the north side neighborhoods are becoming just unlivable. Not unlivable, but unaffordable. And, it was always Mayor Daley's plan to turn the entire lakefront into our downtown. Currently, our downtown is along the lake, but then there is, even affordable housing, public housing along the lake a little further south.
Mhm.
And a lot of that has been gentrified, a lot of the public housing, particularly. And so it's just become a very difficult place to be without money, or without a good union city job, which is also something that's becoming harder and harder to come by. Like I was saying earlier, with charter schools have different contracts if they have a contract at all. And
Mhm.
so when you have teachers being traditionally a huge number of middle to upper middle class folks, with educations, staying in the city. Um, you have now charter schools which can pay much, much less. And in some cases, those charter schools will hire out in the suburbs because they have a loophole where they don't have to follow the residency requirements that the rest of us do. So,
Wow.
and also with the ending of consent decrees, which made a certain amount of jobs for of city jobs set aside for people of color, people who didn't grow up with a lot of money. Those consent decrees, a lot of them sunset and then were never passed again. The standard of living for a lot of people here is just very low.
Oh wow. They just sunset.
Yeah.
That's really unfortunate. Um, San Francisco and Austin, Texas, have lower poverty rates than Chicago, despite considerable media attention to their homelessness crises. Why do you think that is when the city's impoverished population is the fourth largest in the nation, behind New York City, Los Angeles, and Houston?
You know, I've been thinking about this, and I think it's because the media just they love grand narratives, and they don't
Hmm.
like the nuance of all big cities are having a hard time. Basically everyone's having a hard time.
Right.
But what they want to do is they want to give everyone their shtick. And San Francisco's homeless population is something that they could tout. I think a lot of it has to do with trying to justify the gentrification, the absolute unaffordability of that city
Hmm.
by saying, the homeless people that are still here are violent and they're overrunning the city. And I think a lot of it too is there's so many like wealthy tech transplants there,
Hmm.
seeing homeless people for the first time and freaking out. And the media knows that they can capture
Mm.
viewers and listeners by really playing to their fears. And Austin might be similar.
Right.
Chicago, though, we're known as the place where you're going to get shot.
Yes. You look at a sign that says Chicago and then you get shot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
talk to people from not here. There's a line now. It's become a big t-shirt slogan. STFU, shut the fuck up about Chicago. And the line is like, what do you say to someone who's not from here who has an opinion about Chicago? STFU about Chicago.
I couldn't
And
agree with you more.
I'm sorry.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel that way about New York very much.
And so now we're known as the crime city, even though pretty continuously we're somewhere around the 20th in the nation for crime year
Mhm.
after year compared to other cities. And they
Mhm.
really want to show that this city is full of these bloodthirsty thugs that are out for just the knockout game or whatever
Right.
sensational scare tactic they want, and not that the city is full of single moms that are just trying to keep the lights on.
For the single moms that are going to benefit from sub minimum wage being outlawed.
Yes.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. How visible is the poverty and the homelessness in the city? Have you seen a visible increase in the past few years?
What I've noticed is a kind of a more like a dispersal of homelessness. Whereas like remember seeing a lot of homeless people downtown. um I've seen, throughout different neighborhoods, you'll see some encampments, or you'll see, people living under train tracks. I think that people are homeless people are moving about the city. um so the problem is it's a little more visible because of that, because you're seeing homeless people in a lot of residential neighborhoods as well.
Mm,
And our downtown used to be a place where a lot of people worked, especially people with a lot of money. I think because of a lot of work from home, um, and actually I think this is a pretty good thing. Our downtown isn't as lively as it once was.
hmm.
And so, you don't have people coming downtown with pockets full of cash for panhandle, that panhandlers could ask for.
Right.
You're having people not, staying at home and doing their work. Um, so, they have to go where there is a place where they could, panhandle, and it's becoming less and less our downtown.
Hmm. People are also shopping from home too.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, our Michigan Avenue was like the place to go. That's where everyone went at Christmas and any other time, like, for school shopping. Interestingly, that is also the site where the youth violence was happening.
Oh,
What was traditionally more of a shopping area.
interesting. Interesting. I just remember those during COVID, there was a TikTok of this girl taking a cheesecake from Cheesecake Factory. She carried it with one hand, very impressive.
She stole it?
She stole it.
Oh, good for her.
Yeah, she expropriated it.
Yeah, Cheesecake Factory can go with one less cheesecake.
They'll be fine. They'll be fine. So, thirdly, we're rounding out tonight with another uplifting story. This has got to be a TIR first. So, Health Committee agrees to form working group to reopen Chicago's public mental health clinics, expand 911 alternate response via WTTW PBS News. A key city panel agreed Tuesday to craft a plan to reopen public mental health clinics and expand efforts to respond to 911 calls, not with police officers, but with social workers and counselors. The heart of the proposal, known as treatment, not trauma. The measure, introduced by Brandon Johnson and Alderman Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez, 33rd Ward, is set for a final vote by the full city council on October 4th. after winning the unanimous endorsement of the City Council's Health and Human Relations Committee. We believe this is an emergency, said Rodriguez Sanchez. Kenzo, you were particularly excited about this story. Why?
So yeah, 10 years ago, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, when he pushed to, pare down all the public works here as well as privatize as much as possible. The city only had 12 mental health clinics, and that's for a city of about 3 million people. He
Mm-hmm.
closed half of those. And later, one of them was even privatized. And so, what sprung from that was a movement called the mental health movement, which was a movement not only to stop those closures, but to open up more mental health clinics. We have, at that time, there was a mental health crisis, which has even become much worse. It's exacerbated since then. So
Mm-hmm.
right now, there are only 5 mental health facilities within the city of public mental health facilities within the Chicago. Since we went down to that number, we had the pandemic where everyone had a meltdown, understandably, and people's lives were uprooted. Massive amounts of people died. Mental health did not get better afterwards, surprisingly enough.
Shocking.
Yeah, with even less resources, even fewer resources than we had before. I also think that the 50 school closures that Rahm Emanuel um, caused in 2013 also contributed to this mental health crisis. A lot of students at that point were forced to leave the schools where they had community. Some had to commute miles, and I'm talking children. I'm talking like elementary school children had to find ways to get miles away from their homes to go to a different school.
Mm.
And the schools that did receive these students didn't really receive much more funding. And so the idea was like, we were going to consolidate, quote unquote, underutilized schools. The thing is that you don't need to pack schools full of children. Children need to be going to the schools in their community where they recognize people, and hopefully they'll have stable care workers for maybe even from that community. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that was really lost. That's almost 10% of the schools were basically closed under Rahm Emanuel, and all of them were almost all of them were black schools, and some of them were primarily Latino schools. And so you had this massive mental health crisis because like I was saying earlier, we had schools that were sharing social workers and nurses. They didn't get more social workers and nurses when schools shunted more and more students into fewer and fewer facilities. So preventative care through the loss of these clinics was lost. And one thing about the name treatment not trauma, that's very specifically talking about we need to have care workers and licensed clinicians working with people having mental health issues, not the police, who essentially become de facto mental health workers. When
Right.
someone has a mental health crisis, it's the police then that round them up and put them in jails instead of mental health facilities. And you have situations like a couple of years ago at the University of Chicago where there was a young black man having a mental health crisis, and he was killed by university police right on campus.
Mm.
So not only ending this man's life, but traumatizing the people in the community who saw that. And the message there is like, if you have a mental health crisis, you're fucked. You
Right.
have to find a way to hide that, because if you're having a problem in public, someone's going to, it's very likely that the police are going to be involved as opposed to someone who's going to try to help you out through the situation. Um, right now, I'm in school to be a social worker. Interestingly enough, Alderman Losana Rodriguez Sanchez, she's a classmate of mine. She is not only is
Nice.
she an alderwoman, she is also working on her master's in social work at Northeastern Illinois University.
Get
She's
out.
actually on a panel that I'm organizing for the university coming up. It pays to help out, do some
Mm-hmm.
organizing. To brag a little bit, I spoke at the kickoff campaign for her first election. I was the MC. So I'd like to think I got her 5 or 6 votes here and
Nice.
there.
It counts.
Yeah, it does. Well, she won by a margin of 13 the first election.
Wow.
That's what got her into the runoff. And then this time she won when she got reelected. She won handily, but the first time it was not an easy one for her.
Well, she seems like a gem.
Yes, absolutely.
So October 4th is a big day for the city council and the mayor. This could be a signature piece of legislation for all. What can you tell us about the behind the scenes of how this came about?
Well, as far as the reopening of the mental health clinics, that's something that Rosanna was a big push. She was big into pushing that. Mental health has really been her bailiwick in city council, and she's been pushing for those reopenings ever since she took office. And Mayor Lightfoot, Mayor Lightfoot had a bad personality. She would take
Mhm.
it very personally if someone had a very principled opinion against her. So she did target Rosanna very publicly and many times. And she opposed the idea of opening these mental health clinics and made it sound like people who wanted to reopen them were being silly or foolish. Um, Rosanna, however, has been working very closely with Brandon Johnson on this issue to get it to pass. And one thing that was really a good organizing move for all of our socialist aldermen was they used their campaigns not only to campaign for themselves but also for Brandon Johnson. So
Mhm.
when they were knocking doors, they had flyers that had their own name and voting information on it, but also said make sure to vote for Brandon Johnson. So in their communities where they were trusted, um, Brandon was able to get more votes. And because of this, he has been a very good ally to everyone. It's been a partnership, and unlike I've ever seen, except the difference being Rom had partnerships with the banks, and Daley had
Mm,
partnerships with developers. This is the first time I've seen a mayor have partnerships with social workers.
that's awesome. Those are the right people.
Yes.
I feel like social workers should have swords. Not guns, but swords. What do you think of that?
I'd have to learn like how to really wield one, but I also think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Like
it's.
that, I mean, I would take a sword class. That should be part of the social work requirement is a swordsmanship class.
I think that would help a lot of situations.
When I was in college, there were these people, they call themselves the combat club, and they have these big foam swords, and they go out on the quad and just kind of like have medieval fights with them. I mean, they were nerds, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was always just really funny because I actually lived in a building that had a lot of computer science majors, and there was a big cross section of them with combat club people, and so you'd see them in the hallways taping up their swords, and they were really into it. But I'd want a real metal one.
Yeah, you should have one, like a real like blade. It would be cool. People could throw food at you, and you could just cut it.
Oh, no, I would want to, if I had that opportunity, I would make like a rotisserie thing out of that too.
Mm, that could be good for the kids.
Just like impale a chicken, put it over a fire, feed the children, and then ward off the bad people too while I'm, saving the Utes.
There we go. Thinking ahead. I like it.
Oh, actually, also speaking of treatment, not trauma, part of it, the original version of the bill actually would have decreased the police funding by $2 billion, and
Hmm.
that money would have gone towards reopening the clinics. That isn't in the current version of the bill, but what this committee is now going to is tasked with is finding funding for it. So something similar to that may be on the table with a new top cop. That might be more possible. We'll see.
Well, I was wondering about that. Is this gonna get stuck in like committee hell? Committee. We need another committee to explore the committee to find the money, kind of thing.
We're in uncharted waters now. Like I would normally say, hell yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
We had nothing to get. There was one. I would not the word. I shouldn't say socialist. There was one liberal mayor named Joe Moore who eventually flipped, but under Mayor Daley, he was the one vote against everything, and he would put something out there to make his constituents happy. He was in a very liberal ward, and then a hold would be put on everything he put out there. Whoever was in charge of that one committee, it's not called the committee of the whole, but it's the equivalent in city council.
Hmm.
um, this guy Ed Burke would always put a hold on it, so Joe Moore could say to his constituents, "Well, I tried, but nothing could ever make it to city council, make it actually to a vote." Interesting side note about Burke is that he'd been indicted and is no longer in office because he tried to shake down a Burger King in his ward.
Shake down a Burger King.
A Burger King in his ward was looking to expand their parking lots, and they didn't want to pay the piper, so he was pushing on them. And this is a big part of this indictment that he's under.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, that Burger King was the same one that Laquan McDonald, the black teenager who was murdered by police, was murdered.
Mm.
Um, which that actually in the end led to Rahm's downfall, because when he was seeking reelection, he told the state's attorney Nita Alvarez, hide this shit. And
Right.
then she did. It came out after he got reelected, and that kind of followed him throughout the next 4 years. That even though it got him, back into office, he being the smooth political operator was he knew that he wasn't going to get reelected a third time, and that would have hurt Little Rahm's ego too much. So that's when he decided not
Mm.
to run for reelection again.
Little Rom.
But yeah, like those connections are just so interesting. Like that's like the most corrupt. Well, the site of the most corruption. That one Burger King in the city.
Yes. One Burger King. At first, you were like she was shaking down a Burger King. I was like, for money or for food? Because I kind of could understand for food, maybe shake him down.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a good Burger King. That's one of those where, it's been under the heat lamp for a while. That is not a fresh burger.
Oh, forget it then.
Here's my money.
I could settle for some number three spot fries, but if it's one of those Burger Kings, forget it.
Yeah, you got to ask for like extra onions or something so they make it fresh at those places. That's been my tip.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm a vegetarian. Yeah, don't deal with that at all. Yeah. Anything else about this mental health story? It's
Right now,
fantastic. I hope it spreads.
yeah. I mean, for me, also, one of the very hopeful things about it is the fact that this is something that's happening at the very beginning of Brandon's term. So
Hmm.
it's not like he's doing it to get reelected. And, what we see in national and our state politics, always like, oh, a progressive initiative happens at the 0 hour to get the person reelected, and then they let it die. He's going to be
Right.
accountable for getting these things passed for the next 4 years. He's going to have to like listen to constituents for 4 years if these things don't get done. And, there is a movement here. The movement's been building for quite some time. It's the same movement that got him elected. And, I am very hopeful that he's going to remember that.
Yeah. Overall, what do you feel the temperature of the city is?
It's it's hopeful. I'd say
Yeah.
for the first time ever, Chicago has a bit of a different vibe than it ever had. There's there's hope there, as opposed to just we put our heads down because we love the food and the music and the culture and the people here, but we hate the city and we hate the government. It also really does put it on us as residents. Like we have to do more. Like there's so many opportunities now for actual change. we can't be cynical and jaded. I shouldn't say we, because I've definitely been a part of these movements, but I'd say, a lot of people who just say like, it is what it is, and this is just a corrupt
Mm.
city. It's really on them also to do what they need to do to get their needs met, and that's going to require organizing. Because as great as Brandon is, he's not going to do things for no reason. He's going to have to see that there's a movement behind it, or else there's going to be no reason to make any of these changes. And so far, the changes he's been pushing for look pretty good.
Pretty damn good.
Yep. And I'm hoping other cities take inspiration from this.
Me too.
Hmm.
Me too. It'd be nice to see some of these changes in New York City. It feels like the powers are so entrenched, but as you said, you felt that way in Chicago as well.
Yeah. The fact there is so much concentrated wealth within New York, though, does make y'all a very, very unique creature.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
I would love to see the sub minimum wage be done away with here, but like they've got all kinds of people in the back rooms, and you've got the cooks and all these other people who are not even documented, and
Hmm.
it's a lot of struggles at once. Yeah, I'd love to see it though.
Hmm.
And it's good to have an example to point to, say, hey, it's been done, it can be done.
Hmm. And things are
Definitely.
going, we have a very progressive state right now. The governor's doing a lot. We do have a billionaire governor who bought his seat, but he's made strides in, really codifying abortion being legal here.
Hmm.
Um, Also, he had passed a bill that basically bans book bans in Illinois libraries. Like any Illinois library that bans books for having LGBTQ issues or things like that,
Hmm.
um, they lose state funding, and so it's really not. There's no incentive um, to do that. Of course, Christian bookstores still exist, but they'll always exist.
That's true.
There's always going to be money in Christ.
I mean, God always needs money, right? Gotta have it. Gotta have it. So, how are you feeling in your transition out of teaching?
Feeling great. I'm, especially with what's happening in the city right now, it seems like there is a lot of hope for social workers here. Like
Hmm.
the kind of good work that we want to be doing is possible. Social work was not a very liberating field when it was first developed. It really was, it's our duty to help the unwashed masses and really kind of still look down upon them. That kind
Hmm.
of vibe. And I've seen a lot of transformations in a lot of social work programs. I'm in a very progressive one at Northeastern Illinois University. It's other than the fact that it is the cheapest. That's the other reason why I chose it. But the idea of helping people help themselves and helping understanding that the problems also lie in oppression and things that are happening in people's communities that are not their choice. So developing democracy, as well as helping people with their mental health. I'm really looking forward to it. um, the school system, it's going to be a long slog in any real tangible reforms there. So
Hmm.
leaving my eventual leaving of the school system is, I'm looking forward to it. Um, and Yeah, but I will still be working with the same folks. I'll still be working with young people having mental health issues, but not under the auspices of CPS, which has not been a great employer for my last 20 years.
CPS.
Hmm.
Well, tell us what that is for those who don't know.
Yeah, unlike the rest of the country, where that means Child Protective Services, that's the Chicago Public Schools. The big
Hmm.
K pre-K through 12. system in Chicago that has, we've seen some positive movement thanks to the progressive leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union, but it is a very calcified institution, um, and making any kind of real change there is still going to take a lot of effort.
Well, you've got good people on the job there.
Yeah, I think so.
You left them in place, and they're famous all over the country.
Hmm.
Yeah, people know. Didn't
They
one of
don't just
them?
know this is the place where you're going to get shot if you go there.
Yes, it's good for a city to be known for more than that. You won't just get shot. Well, I think we've come to an end. This has been a
All
good
right, it's
show.
been fun.
Thank you so much for coming on.
It's so great not to bring the doom and gloom this time.
Exactly. It's a real first for us. So happy to do that with you. All right. We're going to sign off. We are out.
Peace, everyone.
Peace.